Hello, this is API Raptor, and I'm going to be diving into History 1301, Unit 2, Chapter 1. The Proclamation Line was a line created in 1763, and it's the line of colonial settlement. They couldn't cross it, they couldn't do any of that. The colonists believed that they couldn't cross the Proclamation Line. Natives would tell you what tribe they are, because, each tribe is different, and depending on which one you are, doesn't mean you're the same as every other tribe. England was worried about bloodshed between British settlements and the natives after the war with the French. Many people broke the rules of the line and wars broke out. Pontiac was a leader worried about the English being bad and wanted to push them out because of religious guidance and caused the Pontiac's rebellion. Now, there were forts that were a safe place for natives and the English. Natives are going to constantly lose their land. The Paxton Boys were Pennsylvania men that slaughtered innocent Indians for no reason, but they hated them. Many towns were terrified of the Paxton Boys. That's a fact. Number 2. The England's national debt grew rapidly during the American War in 1780. There was the War of the Spanish Succession in the early 1700s, the War of Austrian Succession in 1740, the 7 Years War around 1760. England tried forcing the colonists to pay 3 cents for Sugar Act. It was a lot back then. The Sugar Act was an indirect tax that wasn't a problem except for the courts. Now, Vice Admiralty courts were courts with a British jury, not like the colonists. Now, number 3. The colonists dug a grave for tax settler as an act of violence to protest, along with pooping all over a house and disassembling a house. The colonists stopped buying English goods, and the English economy dropped. Number 4. Lead, glass, paint, paper, and tea were exported goods that were affected by the Townshend Act. The Townshend Act was a disguise for the government to make money instead of it being a trade regulation. Charles died before it went off the rails. Number 5. A circular is a document of ideas that are shared between people. Deference means treating someone with a high level of honor. The colonists treated England with deference but knew they were wrong. The Daughters of Liberty attempted to make their own clothes. England sent soldiers to the colonies to regulate peace. The colonists called the redcoats lobster backs. Number 6. The Charles River was basically a sewer. Everyone pooped in there, threw stuff in there, all that kind of stuff. Boiling the water and adding tea flavor to it was a great source of drinks. That's why everyone loved it. The colonists smuggled the Dutch tea to not pay the only tax, the tea tax. That's the end of Chapter 1. Chapter 2. The Boston Tea Party was in December and Chapter 2. Number 9. The Boston Tea Party was in December and April 1775. British heard the colonists stored weapons, and they went to take weapons from Lexington and Concord. The colonists were a militia that practiced shooting but weren't an army. The colonists just wanted to show that they had power, but someone shot it and ended bloodshed in Massachusetts. The British broke ranks by moving forward, but went back without any progress. There is a statue of Minutemen to symbolize their victory. The Minutemen were just people who can get a shot ready in a minute. Number 10. Virginia was the biggest slave colony. Lord Dunmore said that slaves could be free by joining the British or Union Army. Dunmore proclamation stated that enslaved people could be free, not the price. Slave owners believed that Dunmore was going to steal their property and break life, liberty, and property. Number 11. Common Sense was a pamphlet written by Thomas Paine that was made for everyone to know. Thomas said that America shouldn't follow the monarchy because it would make everything worse. Parliament had the power of the purse, or to be in charge of the money. The Constitution states how the government is structured and how it works. England had a constitution, but it was confined. King Charles III was only elected because of his mom. That's how a monarchy works. Popular sovereignty is the will of the people. A Republican Party shows up in the 1850s. Republicanism is with the republic. The republic can mean the nation, government, or the people. Republicanism means virtuous citizenry. Virtue is to be nice and upholding. Virtuous citizenry means being a good citizen. Number 12. The Declaration of Independence, or DOI, was a contradiction about saying all men were created equal. The colonists decided that it was time to separate from England, Parliament, and the King after common sense was released and there was a war by creating the DOI. The colonists met in Philadelphia to write the DOI. Every sentence started with he in the DOI to represent the complaints about England. The Declaration of Independence was a list of complaints about Britain. The DOI is in a poor condition due to light and oxygen damage. Jefferson owned about 200 people, or slaves. Jefferson let 5 of them free because they were his children. You cannot cry out for liberty and put people in chains. That's not how it works. Number 13. Washington won the Battle of Saratoga, and after the battle, the French joined the colonists in the Revolutionary War and basically won them a victory. Number 14. England had a very professional army and navy that were trained. Traveling across the Atlantic Ocean takes 8 weeks on ship. The colonists weren't trained well, but had multiple strategies. When the British raped and violated the colonists, people were against them. They fought in the South. Nathaniel Greene had a weird style of fighting, guerrilla tactics, where his men would sneak up on the British and do a hit and run. Number 15. 1/3 of the colonists rebelled against Britain. 1/3 of the colonists weren't sure and didn't fully commit to stuff. And 1/3 of them were loyalists and were on England's side. The loyalists tend to be merchants because England fully supported them. Ben Franklin's son was a loyalist. Jefferson and Washington were rich but didn't support England. The Confiscation Act was passed to take away everything from the loyalists, even imprisoning them. Some of them moved to Canada. Free your country. Number 16. Some black people served in northern armies or the Union, being called rebel soldiers. The patriarchy was denied by southern states because they were scared that slaves with guns would kill the masters. The British believed that Indians were for trade while America saw them for land. The British were worried about losing trade. Women maintained the household. The armies were moving with groups behind them called camp followers, or women with children, and provided the men with laundry services as nurses and prostitutes. The sutler was a person that sold extra stuff that helped a little, like stores in a video games that you don't really need to go to, but they give you boosts and stuff. And the Paxton Boys. Just remember that. Chapter 7, number 18. Americans. Wait. Chapter 2. Yeah, I skipped. I don't know why I put chapter 1, 2. But, chapter 7. Number 18. Americans didn't like the democracy more than the monarchy. The concepts were alien and foreign to us today. If you asked if they wanted to build a democracy, they'd say no. But now we do, apparently. Democracy was dangerous because it would become a mob. Democracy would be the first step to downfall unless there was a dictator or king to solve the problems, is what they believed. But republicanism, or a republic, means that you have citizenry. The people do good. If you have good people, you have a good nation. Property owners would show they are good or have virtue. People will have wealth or are independent. You can make a decision because no one tells you what to do. He's rich. He can't be corrupted. An enslaved person has no independence. The founding fathers said that they would be turned to slaves but just meant their independence would be taken. That's it. White people will compare slaves to children, okay? Women can't be trusted for decisions, and white male and wealth were believed to be in charge. Number 19. Coverture means a married woman, or covert. had no legal or economic status independent of her husband. Women were half of Americans. Richer people usually got portraits of them. Judith Sargent Murray was rich and upper class. She was married to John Adams. She wasn't allowed to do anything because the male figure said to the dominant figure. The law stated that women couldn't get a C-section unless the husband approved, causing a child to be born and grow being disabled from oxygen deprivation. Most values come from family. Moms make the children into virtuous citizens. Murray believed that women needed education to be a better mom and have an important role in society. Number 20. The Revolution raised issues about slavery. You can't have freedom in slavery. If you were a black enslaved person, you believed slavery was evil. Thomas Jefferson was born into a slave-owned family and owned his own slaves later on, only releasing his children, like I stated earlier. Abolition means gone. Jefferson was worried about a division of slavery and no slavery. Every master feared a rebellion from slaves. He wanted to send slaves somewhere else like Africa because they couldn't live together apparently. Number 21. Private mini-missions or slaveholders freed their slaves. In Massachusetts, the Wheatley family manumitted Phyllis in 1773 when she was 21. One of the earliest efforts began in 1775 in Philadelphia, where Dr. Benjamin Rush and other Philadelphia Quakers formed what became the Pennsylvania Abolition Society. Similarly, wealthy New Yorkers formed the New York Manumission Society in 1785, which worked to educate black children and devoted funds to protect free blacks from kidnappings. The 1780 Massachusetts Constitution technically freed all slaves, and nonetheless, several hundred individuals remained enslaved in the state. In 1783, Treaty of Paris, which ended the War for Independence, did not address Indians at all. The Mohawk, Cayuga, Onondaga, and Seneca fought on the British side, while the Oneida and Tuscarora supported the revolutionaries. In 1776, John Adams urged the 13 independent colonies, soon to be states, to write their own state constitutions. The ideas of the French philosopher Montesquieu, who had advocated the separation of powers in government, guided Adams' thinking. Responding to the request for advice on proper government from North Carolina, Adams wrote Thoughts on Government, which influenced many state legislators. He suggested a system of checks and balances in which three separate branches of government, executive, legislative, and judicial, would maintain a balance of power. The 1776 Pennsylvania Constitution and the 1784 New Hampshire Constitution both provided examples of democratic tendencies. In Pennsylvania, the requirement to own property in order to vote was eliminated, and if a man was 21 or older, had paid taxes, and had lived in the same location for more than 1 year, he could vote. Pennsylvania had one House unicameral legislature. Number 23. British reform efforts imposed in the 1760s and 1770s. In June 1776, the Constitutional Congress prepared to announce independence and began to think about the creation of a new government to replace royal authorities. It was to create a league of friendship between the states. The Articles of Confederation authorized the unicameral legislature, a constitution of the earlier Continental Congress. The Articles of Confederation were the first national constitution. Congress readied the Articles in 1777, but did not officially approve them until 1781. The delay of 4 years illustrates the difficulty of getting the 13 states to agree on a plan of national government. In the end, the states failed to provide even half the funding requested by the Congress during the war, which led to national debt in the tens of millions by 1784. Number 24. The Virginia Plan featured a bicameral or two-house legislature with an upper and lower house, proportional representation, or population vote. Connecticut Compromise, also known as the Great Compromise, outlined a different bicameral legislature in which the upper house of the Senate would have equal representation for all the states. Each state would be represented by 2 senators chosen by the state legislature. Only the lower house, the House of Representatives, would have proportional representation. Under the Three-Fifths Compromise in 1787 Constitution, each slave would be counted as 3/5 of a person. 26. The era of the first party system with 2 political parties. There are 3 times that there are 2 parties. Democratic Republicans were also known as the Jeffersons and fought viciously to head in their direction. Parties looked for power, and political parties at the time seemed like a weak government. Social hierarchy is a system of society that is the elite, as the rich and white. In the 1830s, they wanted everyone to be the same. Alexander Hamilton was the idea man in charge of Federalist Party, along with John Adams and George Washington, who didn't state it but sided with them. Thomas Edison and James Madison were Democratic Republicans. Number 27. Report on public credit means debt. The U.S. borrowed money for the Revolutionary War from foreign banks, the Dutch, and the American citizens. Jefferson thinks debt is terrible and messes your life up. He believed that if you are in debt, then you lose liberty. He was in debt, though, and had slaves. The Jefferson Plan is that America should immediately pay off debt, no matter the cost. Hamilton thought that if you managed your money, debt would make you rich. It was a good thing. He believed that if you borrowed money, it'll make you more. He said that don't pay off your debt immediately, but manage it to make more. Jefferson's plan failed and Hamilton won. Hamilton wanted the bank while Jefferson didn't. Bank wasn't in the Constitution. Necessary and proper, though, means that anything was a loophole between Hamilton and Jefferson. Bank seemed necessary and proper to Hamilton, while it didn't seem necessary and proper to Jefferson. George Washington supported Hamilton and the bank. The U.S. didn't have, number 28. The U.S. didn't have many factories. Hamilton wanted factories and would give grants to them. Jefferson believed that towns and farms equal liberty. Hamilton won again. It's the same time, but just stating Hamilton won again. Number 29. Hamilton believed pro-England and Jefferson believed pro-French. Washington wanted neutrality. France chopped the heads off the kings and queens up to British people. And America didn't really like that, by the way. Number 30. The first national bank was based on Rome structure, because, Rome, amazing. They're doing good. And the report of the Secretary of the Treasury to the House of Representatives. In the 1790s, pressing was kidnapping young men to join the Navy. It was done in England. Impressment was British soldiers boarding American ships and forcing them to join their Navy if they didn't have papers. There were 8 forts in the U.S. that were controlled by England and used for trading with Indians for, fur trade. John Jay was sent to England to get a treaty to remove the forts and get better economics. The economic part failed, but Washington was like, no, we must push forward for better connections with England. Bread wasn't easy to sell, but whiskey was. For bread, there was no customers, and it's bulky, and it can't be shipped, and yada yada. But whiskey, it can be. It's easy. Hamilton talked to Washington to ride an 8,000-man army against the rebellion for the whiskey tax, which stopped it. And it wasn't really a rebellion. It was just a few guys that were just not wanting to pay their taxes. So they got scared. Now, Jefferson was against it because of the no liberty thing. Number 31. Washington wanted to go back to Virginia after his second term. John Adams went against Thomas Jefferson, and Adams won. France stole American ships in the Caribbean. The Federalists wanted to go to war with France and side with England. The quasi-war was not really a war, and Adams sent diplomats to end it. He didn't want it to be publicized. He was like, yeah, it's kind of a war, but like, no, not really, not really. And so, sedition means treason. The Sedition Acts took away freedom of speech. The Alien Acts were about foreign rights. So, Sedition Acts, if you were to like say anything about politics, you would get arrested. And that did happen multiple times. Now, these are just some random notes I took that don't really have a section, but they're important. Let's start. Governments are contractual and do certain things to be legitimate, but England broke the contract which caused independence. Direct taxation is money for the government to spend. Indirect taxes are trade regulations. An example of that would be the Navigation Acts. No direct taxation without actual representation. That is said a lot, and it is important. Actual representation means that the people vote for their representatives. Virtual representation means that someone represents you without you voting. The colonists believed that no taxation without actual representation. The Parliament in England's Congress. Colonial assemblies was a taxing body of the colonies. In 1768, the colonies adapted to no taxation without representation. The Coercive or Intolerable Acts were for Britain to take control. Boston had soldiers and politicians, while the people in the country prepared their muskets that weren't accurate. Rifles are grooved for a straight shot, while muskets shot in random places. How does an equal nation treat women and Indians? What role do black people play in the new nation? Black problem was white people won't listen to them. The first effort to build a new nation failed. The problem was that they tried to build a new nation. Now, that's History 301, Unit 2. Most of it. Thank you for watching.